Hello, and welcome to another interview for the Jesuit Schools Network's 50th anniversary celebration. I'm Julia Andretta. I am the communications coordinator for the Jesuit Schools Network. And today I am joined by Sean Agniel, who has agreed to talk to me a little bit about his experience with the JSN. So good afternoon, Sean. How are you today?
Good afternoon, Julia. Good to see you.
So we'll just get started with a little bit about yourself for the folks watching who may not know you already.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Sean Agniel. I'm the Director of Advancement at St. Louis University High School in St. Louis, Missouri. And I've been associated with JSEA for a number of years. For several years, I was the Provincial Assistant for Secondary Education for the Missouri Province and then the U.S. Central and Southern Province, and was fortunate to serve on the JSCA board and was part of the beginning of the Jesuit Schools Network.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I've worked with, we overlapped, so Sean and I are good buddies.
Always again.
So this next question, I always tell people it sounds like a quiz question, but it's not. The first question is, without looking at the JSN's website or their mission statement, how would you describe the JSN's mission, and how would you say that it has fulfilled that mission in the last 50 years?
Yeah, good question. And it does feel like a trick question because I worked on that mission statement. I should remember it. I should have it by heart. I'm not going to try to come up with it, though. But I remember two things about it that I think are really important. One is that I think the Jesuit Schools Network is fundamentally about relationships. And two, I think we were purposeful at the time that we renewed the mission statement that Jesus Christ was a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess as I think about it, and I think about how JSN has fulfilled that mission over 50 years, I think about how important relationships are. JSN has found ways to bring people together, to foster thoughtful conversations, to bring people together thinking about the educational apostolate for the Society of Jesus. But it's as we get to know each other and build friendships with each other, that we deepen our friendship with the Society of Jesus, that really the friendship with the Lord comes into greater relief for us. And then I think there's a renewal that happens the more we give ourselves to that, to just be aligned with the teaching mission of Christ. And I think that's been a remarkable accomplishment of the JSN, because it feels as if it just happens so organically. But of course, Julia, you and I know that there's a ton of behind the scenes work that happens to build a colloquium or cohort gatherings or whatever it is. But all that work is really at the service of those relationships and those friendships and that transcendent vision for Jesuit schools.
Absolutely. I really love that connection you drew between, the interpersonal, network, the connection part of it, and the Christ-centered part of it, because both of those are things that I've heard a lot about, but not necessarily together, hand in hand in the same answer. So I actually really like that framing a lot. And in terms of behind the scenes work, segue, in terms of behind the scenes work, one of the things that we at the JSN and formerly the JSCA worked really hard on and have put out a lot of our documents. So the next question is about a document. So we have, again, the what makes a Jesuit school Jesuit. We have the standards and benchmarks, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on. There are so many. But what is a document that has come out of either the JSCA or the JSN in the last 50 years that really stands out to you now? Mm-hmm. And what about it stands out to you now?
Yeah, great question. And there's a lot of them that are really important. And there's some of those that I felt really personally invested in. And that one, like the standards and benchmarks, we've just used here at St. Louis U High for our sponsorship review. And it was helpful. It was really, really great. Mm-hmm. But I guess when I think about, maybe my kind of early formative experiences for me, I think that this is a little bit of an obscure shot, I guess, but
a deep cut.
In the Foundations compilation, there's a really great essay by Robert Starrett called "Sowing the Seeds of Faith in justice. I think schooling for Christian citizenship, I think it is called. And I came across it the first time when I got into my first year of teaching. Was at Rockers High School in Kansas City, and I was part of the province's alum service corps, and we read Foundations as part of our training regimen, and this was an essay that really grabbed me. Sterrett was taking the sort of the energy and enthusiasm of the Second Vatican Council, and what had been basically a century of development in the church's social teaching, and seeing Jesuit schools as an opportunity to manifest the church's prophetic vision for how humans could live together. And it's very hopeful. I came across it again as I was finishing up grad school, and I was struck by how timeless the challenges seem that he names, but also how needed his tone of optimism is for our contemporary moment. So I think that it's one of those spaces where, over the years, JSCA and JSN have facilitated some wonderfully deep thinking about our mission. This was one of those instances that it really grabbed me, and it kind of, I think, was instrumental in my own sense of vocation for this work.
Absolutely. You mentioned challenges that are presented, but in that hopeful tone. Can you think of a challenge, not to put you on the spot, but can you think of a specific challenge, that one of those timeless challenges that stands out?
Yes. So one of the things that Sterrett talks about is the resistance to change that we might experience. And I think, there's resistance to change that exists in ourselves, in our interior life. And this is the significance of Ignatian spirituality and helping us to come to recognize the resistance to God's intentions for us in our interior life. But then, that gets compounded. The more you put in the same place, all these interior battles all kind of glomming onto each other. And so I think, taking something, of course, the one that's most poignant at the moment is the call for racial equity. And this is something that across Jesuit schools, we're all earnestly wrestling with. And it's hard. It's hard to come to terms with our own struggles around these questions of equity and inclusion. And then it's also very hard to develop plans that meet the demands of justice and can be understood and appreciated, so that there's a conversion of heart that happens within our communities. And I think that this is not just a racial equity question, that these are going to be poignant challenges for us throughout our lives, right? And for centuries, because this is the human project. And I think that the hopeful piece of it is that I think Ignatius gives us resources to live with each other in a hopeful spirit, looking for the best in each other and finding a path that we can all walk along.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was a very good answer.
Oh.
I put you on the spot, but you delivered. So the next thing that I don't have a graceful segue for this one, but
let's just go for it, Julia.
No, so like thinking of again, like the network and the connectedness, something that is maybe the most obvious example of that side of what we do at the JSN are the programming, because that is us, until very recently, that is us physically gathering and having this exchange of ideas. So in the last 50 years, what is a JSN program that you've been a part of that stands out, and what about it was so impactful?
Yeah, the easy one, the low-hanging fruit is the colloquium. I mean, so I'm not going to pick that because I'm going to opt for the obscure.
Low-hanging fruit.
The colloquium is great, and if folks who are seeing this have not been to a colloquium, I heartily encourage you, regardless of your position in the school, board members too, maybe especially. It's just such a great experience of consolation and sort of solidarity in our mission. but I guess I'll go to maybe the more simple kind of entry level JSN programming as one that I think is maybe just the best and really impactful. And the cohort gatherings, the opportunities that JSEA and JSN has created to bring people with the same jobs together, and it just comes back to facilitating relationships. I'm amazed at how eagerly people are to make a friend with somebody who has a job similar to them. There's this sort of like immediate understanding of like, oh, I know what you suffer every day.
Absolutely.
And there's and you need to feel that sympathy sometimes, that you need to feel heard, and it's great because it both provides a shoulder to cry on if you just like the event, but it also is extremely inspiring because you come away with ideas. You hear about how somebody's doing something, you're like, oh, I don't have to just keep doing this the way that I've always done it. Like, this way over here, and so there's practical kind of practical benefits that can immediately just go into effect and help you change the way that you're doing what you do, and that's great. And I think it's those friendships that are made in the cohort gatherings that make the colloquia so enriching. Because then you have run into friends from different schools. Oh, I haven't seen you in 2 years.
Yes, exactly.
This is Julia back in the day when we could hug each other.
I know.
You can imagine.
No.
How scandalous.
Oh, even for me, I felt that as I I just work in the JSN, but people come up to the registration table as I'm handing out name tags, and it's always, oh my God, like it's you, it's been so long. Like that moment is always the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find it interesting because so recently we've moved, obviously, as everyone has, to virtual models of things. And one of the things that we made sure that we immediately implemented was our virtual coffee shops, which is where we bring together. It's kind of the similar to the cohort gatherings, except we were just, for example, athletic directors. We bring them all together, and it was just a space where, like, we're not recording this, we don't have an agenda, just whatever you want or need to talk about. And it was fascinating because the first meetings were kind of what you were saying, more of the commiserating and more of the like shoulder to cry on. And then the next meeting after that was, okay, now we have, now we've had time to think about things and process things. And here are all these great ideas. And here are all these, we're sharing documents or sharing resources. And it was amazing, like just that quick turnaround of like, okay, we've had our minute to process what's going on, and now we're going to get to work. And it was great.
Yeah. And in some ways, I think that, the pandemic has been JSN's moment to really shine, because I think that those connections across schools, we have a completely different set of challenges and problems, but there's a commonality to how we feel those locally. But because of the strength of our connections nationally and internationally, we've been able to. In fact, we even had, thanks to our connectedness, I think we had contact with the Jesuit school in Taiwan very early on in the pandemic, and they were like weeks or not months ahead of us, and they ended up sending face masks and kind of sharing their procedures with us on how they do temperature checks. I mean, and from an advancement perspective, I can't tell you the number of conversations I've had with colleagues in other Jesuit schools trying to figure out, well, our auction's no longer going to happen. Now, how do we raise $1 million?
Yeah.
And so like those coffee shops that you guys facilitated, conversations that PACE offices have facilitated for their school leadership. I mean, these have been vital for us. It's been extremely important in this moment of challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah, that connectedness, that is at the core. That's why we have network right there in the name.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a powerful thing. So we're going to move from a little bit more macro to a little bit more micro. Rather than talking about gatherings of people, we're going to talk about a person.
Yeah.
I'd like you to tell me about a JSEA or JSN staff member, past or present, who had a positive impact on you and the way that you approach Jesuit education today.
My gosh. I mean, there's so many. And of course, you, Julia, are an important part of that story.
Oh, thank you.
There's so many people that I feel indebted to. If forced to name one, I think Father Bill Muller would be somebody that that I would say has been instrumental, not just in you know, in creating the JSN and leading the JSN through a really critical time in its history, but also personally, he's been just such a powerfully good influence on me. Bill and I got to know each other when you know, back when the PACE folks and the JSCA board were trying to figure out how are we going to work more closely together to make sure that there was going to be this very tight relationship between the Society of Jesus, the provincials, and the schools going forward. And here's a couple of things that I've gotten to know about Bill and how he's been important, I think, for the JSN, but also to hundreds, thousands of people personally. He has a fundamental availability for service. Of course, he vowed to that, but he lives it beautifully. He's looking for opportunities to be present and to be supportive. And oftentimes this is a pastoral opportunity. You know, I mean, my goodness, his first year as executive director, he was forever flying back to California for weddings.
Oh, yes, he was.
But it's a sign of how readily welcomed he has been into people's lives and how important he is to so many people. And he finds ways to try to be present to people for those pastoral moments. He has a deep love and a commitment to the mission of the Society of Jesus. And I think that has led him to lots of different roles. And he's an exceptionally talented retreat leader. But that ability to articulate the mission of the society and to share Ignatian spirituality with others has been positioned not at a retreat house, but as a high school president and in internal governance for the society, and here in this really awesome leadership role as executive director of the JSN. He's able to come into messy, difficult situations and to present with composure and a depth of wisdom and a tone of love. And those are qualities and characteristics that I hope will permeate every leader in Jesuit schools in the coming decades. He's also given me a very profound, renewed my interest in my love for poetry and Shakespeare.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And that's a gift. And again, I think that's a quality in leadership that maybe is too quickly overlooked. You know, would that all our leaders had such a love for beauty and a willingness to share it.
He this morning brought to our staff meeting an E.E. Cummings poem. And I every time I'm always so excited. He a lot of Mary Oliver too, who I adore. And I didn't know Mary Oliver actually before he started bringing her to meetings. So again, yeah, it's like a very similar thing. Oh man, you know, when people say bring a prayer, open with a prayer, you know, you're thinking of like something out of a book of, you know, a book of common prayer. But there really is a lot about poetry that is very prayerful. And I think Bill is a very good example of that connection.
Yeah, I'm preparing a talk for Thursday, and I was just thinking about him because there's a Mary Carr book of poetry on my nightstand, and I saw it, and I said, yeah, Bill would include a poem if he was giving this talk.
He would. I couldn't have put it better myself. So I have one last specific question. I'm going to ask one more, but and that is the way I've been describing it to people is like a moment frozen in time. So if there is one fond memory that you would bring that you associate with JSCA/JSN, that's just like a very specific memory that you hold on to.
Yeah, I do. And I'm going to cheat, Julia. I'm going to fuse two memories together.
Okay. But that's allowed.
I think they happened at different times, but they may have happened similarly. You can correct me because I think you were here. But okay. I remember when Bernie Bouillet was where he retired and was recognized, and I believe it was at a colloquium, and
I think it was 2016 colloquium.
Okay, good.
I think so.
Yeah, and he. It was an important moment for me. Bernie is somebody that I didn't have the benefit of. I didn't have the benefit of his mentorship. I knew him and I had worked with them. We knew each other, but people adored Bernie, and I never had the opportunity to work that closely with him and to learn that closely from him. But I know how important he was to JSEA, and I know that he formed many leaders who I admire and respect, and I know how indebted we all are to him. And when he gave the speech, he gave just a few words, but they were eloquent and humble and passionate. And I remember feeling the challenge to carry this mantle and to continue the sort of blessed work that he had given a good portion of his life to. And it really is something that stands out. And I continue to feel a great sense of gratitude to Bernie. And then the second, if I could, cheat and infuse.
Oh yes, go for it.
And it may have been at the same colloquium, Julia, but when Jim Stager was also recognized. So
it may have been the same.
Father Jim Stager, who was the president of the JSEA, and I really enjoyed working closely with Jim. And you know, Jim had. So he'd taken his next assignment, which was going to be working in vocations in the vocations office for the Midwest province. And he came back and he gave also a lovely talk that I remember finding somewhat humorous. And I just had this sense that, like, here was Jim. He's back. He's a fish in water, right, with this group, the high school group, which are his people forever, you know. And he played so many different roles and had done so many good things, both for the province and for the old Chicago province, and then of course for JSEA. But then he also had this like 1 foot out, like where you could tell that he was very much like excited about the vocations work that he was doing, and I think he even made a pitch while he was giving his talk, and it was just,
that sounds about right.
It was great.
Yeah.
It just put his wonderful personality on display, and I just remember feeling such a sense of gratitude for having the chance to work with him. And I don't know if you can see, but there's the Sushape prayer that Jim gave the board at the time when he retired.
I have those too.
Yeah, and I came to my office because I just felt like it was such a wonderful and a beautiful gift, and Jim was a gift to JSN and JSEA. So those two I would bring together because of just the warm feeling in the crowd as we recognize those two great JSEA leaders, and the sense of challenge and responsibility that I think that we all carry now to continue that work that they laid the foundation for.
Absolutely. Oh, well, thank you. So my last question, like I said, just vague, is there anything that you'd like to leave us with, or anything you want to make sure you say? What final thoughts? Yeah,
I feel like the work that the Jesuit Schools Network does is so important and so valuable, and something that's available to all of us who work in Jesuit schools. And I think it's when you think about the future of Catholic education, the relationships that we have with each other across schools positions us to lead. And the more in concert we are with each other and with the Society of Jesus and our common mission at the service of Christ's mission, the more hopeful I am about our future. And so I'm grateful to what has gone before us. The challenges ahead are significant, but Jesuit Schools Network will be just a vital resource as we work together for our future. So I feel it's a privilege to be a part of it.
Thank you so much, Sean. Yeah, that's all I had. And thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for your beautiful answers. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. You too. Take care.